last lectures. And that is, those of you who came expecting to see one-arm push-ups, I'm sorry to tell you, you will be greatly disappointed, unless somebody in the audience was prepared to do them. But anyway, from that, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my professional journey, educationally, scholarly, and otherwise, and looking at it at the lens of teaching as questioning, and looking at this in the realm of 4 areas, which is questioning as pedagogy, questioning as coaching, as challenging assumptions, and then finally as research. Now by the time I had gotten to around the tenure decision, I had come to a realization that there are some people on this campus who can present material very compellingly for 1 to 3 hours straight, not bat an eye, everybody hanging on their entire words. It's clear to me that I was not one of those people. And so I was working on figuring kind of, well, trial and error, I guess, but kind of fumbling and stumbling around a bit as far as developing an approach as teaching as questioning, as far as raising questions when folks bring up discussion and trying to push them and move them further along through the role of questioning rather than a little less anyway on the role of direct instruction. And actually, during last decade, I stumbled upon some research that provided some research-based, evidence-based method for my madness, which is the community of inquiry framework. Now I'm going to get up and point this on the slide and point out these areas because I tried working with the pointer and I just wasn't getting it to work right in the pre-meeting activity. But to explain this, we're talking primarily the intersection of what Randy Garrison and colleagues referred to as teaching presence and cognitive presence. Now, teaching presence they define as having 3 dimensions, which is course design and organization, which is kind of the stuff that you do before the course even starts as far as getting it set up and ready to go. Direct instruction, which is direct conveying of content, which, well, from my research and some other things that I've seen, is probably the primary instructional role for those who teach more technical or quantitative type content. And then the 3rd dimension, which is more where I reside, in the area of facilitating discourse, as far as helping to engage students in further conversation to help further extend the topic. And this role is in the area of cognitive presence, and that they define cognitive presence as having as a 4-step process, as one of which is the triggering event, which is be it posting or some point in a class discussion that raises that people wanted to pursue further. And that leads things into exploration as far as, well, let's see where this goes, what it does. Now, much of the research on this framework suggests that most online inquiries don't move beyond that point. But one of the things that this framework motivated me to do, or at least to have as a model, is to move to those other directions, especially since in a business school we are a relatively applied type of field. And where the next 2 steps, one is integration, where we try to identify, okay, from this exploration, what are some of the things that we want to pull out that we might be able to work further. And then it culminates, hopefully, with the idea of resolution, which means that you have something that you've taken away from the discussion that you can apply, be it to class assignments, be it end-of-course deliverables, be it to your job, but that there's somewhere that there's a point of application that's taken from that material. And so this has kind of driven my approach, especially to online teaching, or at least I'm cognizant of it, as I get involved with an online class. Now, as a result, one of the things where this coaching particularly, where the questioning lends itself nicely, is as far as an approach for coaching. And that in our personal and professional development class here at Oshkosh and the MBA Consortium Module 4, we have moved to a peer coaching model for that class. and that we actually use some of it. I see several executive MBA alumni that they are well aware of this as well. And where it's drawn from some of the primary research on peer coaching is that one is it is most effective when the coaching is focused on asking questions of the coachee and helping them to figure out the solution to their situations themselves rather than just telling them what to do. Which also, that's the thing about coaching that happens to be the most difficult thing for coaches to get out of that mode. Because it's so hard to say, oh, if I just tell them, you should do this. But, well, like most of us, if we figure it out ourselves, is much more likely to stay rather than if someone tells us, especially if them telling us that was unsolicited. And so the way these classes work is that well, in the Oshkosh class, in the Executive MBA program, we have a day that's devoted to helping folks greatly accelerate the pace at which they become familiar with each other. And we do a variety of exercises in those classes, some of which I'll touch on a little later. The consortium class is a little bit more difficult because we don't have any in-person presence with them. And so what we've done as far as for forming the coaching groups is before the class starts, we ask people in the class, okay, can you give us a couple of folks that you would like to work with, and can you identify any particular people that you definitely do not want to work with? And so generally, especially as long as I remember who said what, that approach has worked reasonably well. And one of the things that's surprising to me, or maybe surprising to many, and some of it may be a function of being able to observe all the conversations rather than just hearing them in and out or going to and from conversation in the classroom. But it seems as though, at least from my experience, that in the online environment, people practice the principles and ideas of peer coaching better than they do in the classroom settings. And moving further from there, ideas of questioning assumptions. And in this material on personal and professional development, the key deliverable for that class is a personal needs assessment and development plan. And one of the initial points for starting out on that material or on that plan is having folks develop a personal mission and vision statement. And one of the articles we use from there is Clay Christensen's piece on how will you measure your life. And it was motivated. He is a Harvard Business School professor who happened to graduate from Harvard Business School. And that they had a class reunion a while back. And he began to notice how many of his classmates either had families that were in disarray, their careers were going nowhere, and some of them had even done jail time. And that he thought, well, I don't think when we were back here as students that any of these folks would have written on a development plan that any of these things would have been their goals. And so he framed this article around 3 questions for people to think about. One about how do you make the most of your career? How do you do well and have a success within your family? And 3, how do you stay out of jail? and it's interesting, actually, as far as tying to the questioning and assumptions, because especially it seems to happen more in the online classes than in the classroom courses, that a student will raise up, and it can be from a variety of faith perspectives, but it typically comes from the Christian perspective, where they'll say something along the lines of, well, because I'm a Christian and my faith guides me, that I don't have to worry about being in jail. And so I've come to take it as, well, wait a minute, didn't the Apostle Paul do a fair amount of jail time? And it has the way of getting them to realize that some of those assumptions may be socially constructed and may be a byproduct of what's happened from a country perspective rather than a faith perspective necessarily. And so to get them to be able to think further from those angles. Another way, especially in the professional development class and and the EMBA alums remember this well, we have during this day of experiential learning, one of the activities we do at the first of the day is to play a game of tag. And it is a modified version of tag from what most of you have seen from your younger days. And I took on the role. It used to be when I went to this class early on, we had it out at the mental health center at the ropes course. And I'd show up in camo gear and try to engage the most athletic people in the class as far as challenge them to tag them or be avoided tagged by them. And by the time boy number 2 arrived, I came to the conclusion, you know, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so I started thinking about it and looked at this idea of tag where, as most of us would say, well, being it, well, it's bad. Whatever it is, it's bad. And I started thinking about it and said, well, what happens if being it is a good thing? And so I went into these tag activities with that perspective. And that, well, once students got over the idea of that, what do you mean the instructor's playing along with us? Getting into the role of actually trying to mess with people as far as what numbers of a group would constitute safety, and then also actively trying to be tagged or made it, because I realized that in this, the way the game was configured, that if you were it, you basically controlled the game. You decided that you decided how long you were it. You decided who was going to be it after you. And so that I would then go after the people who were most horrified by the prospect of being it. And with the hopes of helping them to see that, well, some things may have changed since you were a kid, and so this maybe is not so bad anymore. Other areas in which challenging assumptions come up as far as intermingling contact and process in what's called our project portfolio management class. This is kind of interesting because one of the deliverables, well, it's divided that 50% of the deliverables for the course are required, 50% are taken from a pool of potential deliverables of which the students select a combination of deliverables totaling up to 50%. It's kind of interesting because I just had one of the deliverables is a course redesign paper where people provide feedback, and I've actually used myriad comments from those papers to reshape the course. I got a paper yesterday that I was grading that essentially said I should blow the whole thing up. And so this was kind of interesting, and I said, and well, essentially wanted to have, okay, walk us through week by week and give us feedback every week after what we've done. To which I kind of said in my response, I kind of like the environment where students actually have to think for themselves. So, but in content, actually given what he proposed, depending on what the instructor was trying to accomplish with the course, it was actually a very good outline, and I mentioned that to him at the end of the paper. But the way this class is set up is that course content on managing a portfolio is highly integrated with the course process. Well, that idea of building your own portfolio, or at least a portion of it. In this class, it's only been offered online. I have no idea how I would teach it as a classroom course. That we typically have 5 or 6 discussion topics a week, of which each student is allowed to participate in no more than 2. And as in one of their other deliverables where they describe how they went about choosing their project portfolio and providing the rationale for why they did the things they did, including how they went about selecting which topics they chose to pursue. Going up further along the project management stream, and we got several folks active in PM in the realm in the room, and they might readily agree with me where it seems if you read the PM literature much at all, it's not hard to get the impression that people can't even go to the bathroom without senior management support within the context of a project setting. And so one of the things that I try to do in this realm is, well, unmask some of that. And go to, well, sometimes folks, regardless of where they're at in the organization, sometimes we just need to grow a spine and do what needs to be done in order for things to get done. And extending to the ethics section of the class, well, to the ethics class. This kind of extends itself, the idea that we are dependent on senior management for most, if not everything, within the organization. And one of those being, as far as the formal organizational culture, is that senior management is responsible for setting the ethical tone. Which it struck me, well, if you happen to be here about a decade ago, about 10 years ago, or the start of the decade, you remember that this was an environment where senior management not only could not reward performance, they could not stop performance from being punished. And so in that sort of environment, how much does senior management really have a say over how we conduct ourselves as faculty and staff in an ethical manner? And that this in essence has to come from us, and that we do this in concert with the leadership of our organization. And then finally, as far as questioning for research, a piece that struck me that came out about 8 years ago by Gordon Daler, Joy Beatty, and Jen Lee talks about the concept of the scholarly management educator. And by this they mean of the management educator, and it certainly can extend to the entire business school, that the educators, these are people who are not only consumers of business and management education research, but they also are producers of that research. Kind of drawn to our own present situation from this, a couple of my co-authors, Charles Fornaciari and Carlos Asarda, are with us this evening. That we've been doing some studies on individual and institutional productivity in educational research in business schools. And we've done a couple of 10-year studies out as far as for individual author productivity. And each of the studies have kind of shaken out the same way, of about looking at, we had each of the major business disciplines represented, and so there were at least 2 journals from each of those disciplines that were in our pool, 17 journals in total, 4,500 articles in total. And of those articles, 80% of the authors that were associated with the articles in our pool were what I call the one and done variety. That they had published one article in this pool of 17 journals in 10 years. And which suggests we got a lot of room for capacity, for being able to develop and welcome in new dedicated scholars to business and management education research. As a matter of fact, at the present point, if you were to publish an article every other year in one of this pool of 17 journals, you would be amongst the 100 most productive business and management education scholars on the planet. Which, as far as disciplines go, that's a pretty low bar. So if following well from my entrepreneurship past from long ago, if somebody's looking for opportunity recognition, of which we hope they are, that this would be something that people will pounce on in the years coming ahead. Yeah, even from the perspective of questions continuing, many of my articles take the article titles take this form of simple question, like, is there an optimal design for online MBA courses? How much does subject matter in online learning? What critical student issues face non-elite schools? And then, well, not surprisingly from what I just said, where are the dedicated scholars of business and management education research? And there's more, but it just as far as it gets, the idea of questioning has a way, I guess, of flowing across multiple areas. And then in the final realm, and we'll close with this, is that draws from the perspective of the joy of working with friends. Now, much of what I'm here and why I've been asked to do and accomplishments and stuff are associated with my work in online teaching and learning, particularly in business schools. And my wife and I were kind of doing a count of this the other day, and we found that I had 43 peer-reviewed publications. There's like 37 articles, 6 book chapters in there. And of those, 17 were solo authored pieces, 10 had more than one co-author, and of those 10, 5 were co-authors from UW Oshkosh, which suggests that for the most part, I spent a lot of my time either working by myself or with somebody from somewhere else. Or about 3/4 of my publication activity reflects that. And while, yeah, there's some great and wonderful things that have happened with that, there's also a cost that's come to them as well. I can't help but think that my involvement in the life of the university, sorry, Chancellor and Provost, has been adverse. I likely would have been more involved in the life of the university had I not gotten involved in this realm. And that since I was kind of a person of, well, you get in the office, go at your stuff, and then when you're done or have a stopping point, you go home. I wasn't engaged in hallway talk and things like that as much as I likely would have been otherwise, which this makes me particularly grateful for seeing so many people from the college that are outside the Management and Human Resources Department because, well, the way that Sage Hall is set up, sometimes I have to intentionally walk around where your offices reside because otherwise I'd never see you. But as a contrast to the things that I'm doing now as far as looking at, I call it building an infrastructure for business and management education research. And where, well, Alvin Wong, another one of our co-authors, and I, about 4.5 years ago, got involved, got curious about citation activity in business and management education, which then flourished on to building infrastructure, of which, well, then Charles got involved. And then Carlos came to me wanting to work on a project related to online learning, and to which my response was, boy, do I got a deal for you. And he's come along with us and is very glad he did. And we have others, and even in this setting now, I've even got at least one UW Oshkosh colleague working on this. Chris Jones from the accounting department is joined in with some of our work. Okay, that's actually a little less brief than I'd intended of a discussion of how teaching as questioning has informed and driven my professional experience. And so with that, I just wanted to wrap up with a thanks, and well, first with my family who have put up with some of my eccentric behaviors and in the midst of it. Folks in the college who, through their doing things, through the things that they did and have done, have enabled me to be able to do the kinds of things that I've been doing. The university leadership, certainly throughout my career, has been more than helpful and has been very gracious in their dealings with me. A number of students that are here, thank you for being a springboard and for helping me to refine and think through things on myself. There's other research colleagues and colleagues in general. I see Ken Brown, who was my editorial successor for Academy of Management Learning and Education. Yeah, thank you for coming, Ken. And then the general community as well, that you kind of observe and put up with this odd duck as he goes about sometimes. So with that, I'll wrap up, and well, thank you again for your attention.
Before we end, I would like to have you guys all sit back down again. Come on. There I am. Thank you all for attending. Before we wrap up and adjourn to celebrate Ben in all of his accomplishments, we have a short video by Kathleen Barnes, the incoming Dean of Salem State University's Bertolin School of Business and Membership Coordinator for the Academy of Management's Management Education Division. So please watch.
Hi, Ben. I wish I could be there for your last lecture. I know it's terrific. As you know, you have been selected for this year's Academy of Management, Management Education and Development Most Outstanding Contribution to MED Award this year. This was not only for everything you've contributed to the division, but also to how you've developed new scholars and contributed to the management education and development literature. I'm also here today to announce that from this year forward, that this award will be named in your honor. It will be titled the J.B. Ben Arbaugh Most Outstanding Contribution MED Award. Congratulations, Ben. It is well deserved.
Ben, do you have any additional words now that you know that? You're good. Ben says he's good. Can we have one more round of applause for Ben and his family? You are welcome to join us next door for coffee and cake. It's a smaller room, so feel free to mingle back into this room if you'd like, but you are welcome to stay as long as you like.